Hello, and thanks as always for listening. My name is Bryan, host of the Plant Podcast. The Plant is brought to you by ThinManager Software, the global leader in industrial thin client management and mobility solutions. ThinManager is a Rockwell Automation technology. In this episode of The Plant, Doug Coulter from Rockwell Automation joined us to talk about the newest release of the ThinManager platform, version 11. As the product manager for ThinManager, Doug supplies amazing insight into the ThinManager product, what features and refinements are now available in version 11, and even a look at what to expect in upcoming releases. Hello and welcome to The Plant. I'm your host, Bryan Harned, and joining me today is Doug Coulter, product manager for the ThinManager platform at Rockwell Automation. This year, ThinManager turns 20, and in those 20 years, we have continued to refine ThinManager to meet the challenges and needs of today's manufacturers like no other solution available. We're going to pick Doug's brain to find out some of the new features available now in ThinManager, and also what we can expect in the future. Doug has been on the show before. I'm really happy to have him back and for him to agree to come back. Doug, thanks for agreeing to come back on and talk ThinManager with us again.
Hey, Bryan, always happy to join the Plant Podcast. I mean, I can't believe the 20 years old thing. When you mentioned that kind of made me do a double take. It's pretty crazy. In some ways, it seems like it's been just yesterday. Other ways, it does seem it seems 20 years.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, you're like, oh, that happened so fast, and
Yeah.
you start thinking about all the stuff you did, and you're like, well, maybe it wasn't that fast.
That's right, man. That's right.
So version 11, we've been on this cycle. We released version 10 in December of 17, and version 11 came out this last December of 2018. It has many new features. A large amount of attention this year was placed on localization and security. We've also talked, in the marketing meetings about productivity enhancements and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could just start off by sharing some of the features that have now been incorporated into ThinManager to address the localization and kind of where the product will be moving.
Yeah. So definitely excited to release version 11. It was December 21st of 2018. I got a lot of positive feedback from our development team and all those surrounded with getting that product out right before Christmas. That's probably not the best idea. So going forward, you'll probably see a little bit of a shift, with major releases, maybe a couple months after the holidays, since it really is kind of challenging to get out right before the holidays. But yeah, localization really important for us. Since being acquired by Rockwell, in 2016, as you can imagine, a lot of international doors have been opened. I mean, ThinManager was sold globally, for many years, but not with the same sales force that we bring to bear now. So this became really important for us. This is really a priority, this localization effort for version 11. We have an existing module called the keyboard configuration module, and that module supports 43 different languages, but it only applies to keyboard entry within a remote desktop server session. So things like entering relevant usernames and passwords within the ThinManager firmware, within the native portion of the firmware, would only support English characters, right? So naming display servers, display clients, and locations in the admin console, those only supported English characters as well. So this version of ThinManager, version 11, we really focused on improving that localization effort. So what we've done is we've introduced this new module called the language selection module. And initially it's supporting languages like French Swiss, German Swiss, Russian, and Spanish. And you'll see that we're going to be adding additional languages throughout the year. And we'll be able to do that modularly. And so the end users will only have to update a firmware package, not necessarily a whole version of ThinManager. So our phase one was really addressing that keyboard entry, both within the admin console and within the ThinManager firmware. Phase two, which we'll be looking at for version 12, again, which will be scheduled probably in the February timeframe of next year, we'll look at introducing what we call localized strings in the firmware so that the prompts that you see will show up in that language, whether that's in our firmware or our mobile clients. And that'll be the next step for for addressing localization across the product.
Yeah, that's great. I know we've started to make a big push from a marketing standpoint, of course, to not just do English, but push out into the other languages, especially the main European and Asia Pacific, Latin America. Um, Also, in ThinManager 11, I know this was our first like real jump to incorporate some of our FactoryTalk users and how ThinManager incorporates into FactoryTalk from Rockwell. Can you talk a little bit about what we've done there to improve
Yeah, for
that?
sure. So version 11 was the first version that introduced a different activation method for our customers, and that specifically is factory talk activation. So our customers will now have the option, once they've installed ThinManager 11, of choosing the activation method that they want to use. They can continue to use the traditional ThinManager master licensing, or they can switch to the factory talk activation method of activating the product. Of course, in order to get the right activation keys, the customer will have to make sure that they're ordering the right catalog number. We introduced some new FTA, or factory talk activation catalog numbers. So once that order is placed, the product key and serial number that's used for FTA will be generated. Versus the pre-existing catalog numbers, which are still available. Those, of course, generate just the traditional ThinManager product license. So the other point there is, if a customer is going to use FTA, we do want them to make sure that they're using FactoryTalk Activation Manager 4.03.03, and that's because our implementation of FTA uses CodeMeter. And 4.03.03 is the version that's required to support CodeMeter. And one other thing there is that we do support the Gold Master license. So in our implementation, our users of the SI Toolkit, Rockwell employees that have a Gold Master, those will work and activate the product. In terms of the benefit for FactoryTalk View SE, there's a really big benefit with version 11 of ThinManager combined with FactoryTalk View SE version 11, and that is, with those two versions, a customer will only require a single SE client license per ThinManager terminal. And that's really important because some of our customers are delivering multiple instances or multiple sessions of FactoryTalk View SE, coupled with potentially having failover set up in ThinManager. And previous versions would require an individual SE client license for each one of those sessions, even if it was delivered to a single ThinManager terminal. Now with version 11 of both products, that's only going to require one SE client license. It's a really big competitive advantage for FactoryTalk View SE when combined with ThinManager, over the third-party HMI solutions.
Yeah, I could see that being very huge, especially with tiling. You get, any kind of display and you got tiled four different clients or four different sessions. And yeah, one license as opposed to four just right there, would be huge.
Absolutely. And imagine if you throw in failover, now you've got 4 times 2, which is 8, right? And now you're forcing that down to a single SE client license. Again, huge benefit, really huge benefit.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. All right, well, moving on, the next thing that has been touted with version 11 is the UEFI support. And I don't really know a whole lot about UEFI. I know it's an option when you're creating a virtual machine if you want to use it. But what exactly does that mean for the end users?
Yeah, so prior to version 11, if a customer had a thin client, they were using it with ThinManager, it was a thin client that was using a traditional BIOS. As what we're seeing is hardware manufacturers are moving away from that traditional BIOS in favor of UEFI. And so what that means for our end users is that in order for them to continue to have the same broad selection, of hardware that will work with ThinManager, it was really important for us to support UEFI going forward. So we're really happy to include that in this release. So the short term, again, that's just going to enable our users to still have that broad range of selection, that broad range of choice. But longer term, UEFI is going to open up some doors for us too, so that we can offer things like secure boot, as an example.
I gotcha. Okay. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So staying cutting edge, if you will.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now,
That's where we want to be, Brian. That's where we want to be.
yeah, exactly. I know that there are some features that we were looking to get into 11 that didn't quite make the release, and I know we've talked about
Yeah.
11.1 and kind of some of the future updates and what we can expect to happen. But I wonder, as a kind of a roadmap to the future, what can we expect? Maybe down the line this year and maybe into next.
Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right. There were some things that we had planned to get included in that 11.0 release that have been pushed out, and so what we decided to do was introduce an 11.1 release that's right now scheduled for June 28th of this summer. And one of the big things that we've got included in that point release is facial recognition. That was something we wanted to get in 11.0. It's something that we showed at Automation Fair last year in Philadelphia. And essentially, that's going to enable our users to use a real sense 3D camera connected to a ThinManager managed Thin client and essentially allow a user to authenticate based on that camera recognizing that user's face. So very much like the Surface, the Surface Books, the Surface Pros, of course, like your new iOS devices that have that Face ID implementation. It's a very similar idea where you're enrolling a face, assigning it to a relevant user, and then enabling ThinManager to authenticate, based on the recognition of that person's face. And it'll also have this learning capability because, as our faces can change over time, typically gradually, hopefully. But somebody introducing some new, a new hairstyle or lack thereof, in my case. You want to make sure that that user can still be recognized. So that's going to be built into that.
Very cool. Now, can you combine authentications? Like, can you have PIN and Face ID, or is it kind of like the fingerprint? Like that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll be able to still do multi-factor authentication if you like. Even with fingerprint, you can have ThinManager store that user's password, for example, their AD password, so that a fingerprint is all that is required. Of course, if ThinManager is going to be doing any storing of passwords, it's always done in an encrypted way. But you have a lot of flexibility with ThinManager, and what's great about that, and what's great about the manager being the platform for this content delivery is it's really abstracted, from all of the applications that are being delivered. So every time that ThinManager introduces one of these new authentication methods, it really becomes available to the content that's being delivered, especially like FactoryTalk View SE, since we introduced that authentication pass-through capability, last year in December, in the December release of ThinManager 10.
Yeah, I mean, doing your password multiple times or authenticating anyway multiple times gets kind of old.
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, it was. I know we had looked at some of the mobile applications, and we were always trying to progress the iOS apps and the Android app and everything. But I think that we were talking about some of the features that are available for when you're using a non-mobile app that we're getting into some of the other applications. What's the time frame on that?
Yeah, so specifically like IP camera, virtual screens, and tiling, those features originally were designed and created for our firmware. So our Thin Manager managed Thin clients, for example, could leverage those capabilities, but not our mobile clients. So IP camera, tiling, virtual screens was not supported in WinTMC, iTMC, or ATMC. And we had hoped in version 11 to have those all at that level where they supported them. We didn't quite make that for a number of reasons, but WinTMC, I'm happy to report, which the latest release is version 4, which is downloadable on our website, does have support for IP cameras, tiling, and virtual screens today.
Okay.
We're looking to incorporate those features in iTMC and ATMC throughout the year. So what our users can expect is a kind of a phased release cycle for each of them for iTMC and ATMC. And what they'll expect to see is support for IP cameras first, for example, and then later, after IP camera support, we'll be introducing that tiling and virtual screen support as well.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, basically throughout the year, it's going to just keep getting beefier.
Exactly, exactly. And as always, we apologize when we don't meet these. For our end user, we don't meet our goals with these releases. Typically speaking, there's usually a very good reason why, and ultimately, it generally comes down to the fact that we want to make whatever we release to have the best, customer experience possible. So if it means pushing something out just to make sure that we ensure that, that's what we'll do.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to release something that's buggy or, having problems from the get-go.
We've all experienced that, and even our best efforts, that still happens from time to time, but we try to respond to those as quickly as we can with service packs, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I know from a marketing standpoint, the mobile stuff is, I guess, fun to talk about, if you will. It's a little bit more attractive from a marketing standpoint to talk about all the different features rolling into the mobility. I know one of the things that I talk about quite a bit, and a lot of people don't know, is just in the nature of how the devices work, that some of the wearables, the watches, text messages, things like that are available just because you can set to get those alerts on your watch or on your phone, that a lot of people don't even know that's possible, because we're not talking about those devices, but that
Sure.
those features are already there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The alert emails, the SMS messaging, you can basically set that up for any ThinManager system type alert. If a remote desktop server becomes unavailable, as an example, or a primary ThinManager server becomes unavailable, you can configure ThinManager to notify a user in either of those methods. And as you mentioned, Brian, that can certainly be tied, if you have a smartwatch, to be notified, directly via smartwatch as well. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, all of this is great stuff. Before I let you get out of here, every version has, the feature that people aren't really talking about, but is actually really cool.
Yeah.
So, what, in your opinion, what's something that we've put into 11 that people don't know they're gonna love?
I like that. I kind of like a sleeper feature pick. I
Exactly.
like that idea. Yeah, yeah. So I think what fits that bill is our updated USB touchscreen module. With For our customers that are using touchscreens, more often than not, they're using a USB connected touchscreen. And in order to make that work, you would be using our USB touchscreen module. The new version enables some really interesting touch and hold capabilities. So you can configure a touch and hold timeout, or time period, such that when that time is triggered, you can have a configurable number of options be presented to the user through a context menu. So, for example, if you wanted to present them with a list of the available display clients from which to choose, you can do that now. Previously, the selecting between display clients, you had to either do through tiling, or you had to use that display client selector at the top of the screen. And many times that display client selector was overlaying on top of, say, an alarm banner in an HMI application. So this is going to be a really welcome change to how users can change, switch between display clients. And they can also introduce other actions in that context menu, like launching the calibrate touchscreen utility, or triggering the main menu to be presented. So yeah, I think, to me, that's kind of the sleeper pick. I think customers that realize that they have that option now, they're all going to migrate to that for navigating between display clients, as opposed to the other options today.
Yeah, that's a UI improvement that will improve user experience for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a good one.
Cool.
That's definitely one that people will forget how they ever lived without
That's what we're after, Brian.
it.
That's exactly what we're at. The holy grail right there. How did I live without it?
That's
Yep.
right. Can you even believe that wasn't available before? All right. Well,
Exactly.
all right. Well, I will let you get out of here. Thanks for talking. I mean, I like having you on here every time there's a new release, because you just get a different perspective on some of these things, why we put them out there and what exactly they're going to help.
For sure. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
So thank you very much for coming on.
No problem, Brian. Anytime.
We're going to call it quits on this episode of The Plant. We've got some exciting episodes planned for this year, and we hope you will join us for each of them. To learn more about ThinManager and the new features in version 11, visit thinmanager.com from any and all of your devices. I'm your host, Bryan Harned, and we look forward to talking to you next time on The Plant.